Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun!
In the quiet solitude of his bedroom, Matthew sat in front of the mirror, a master painter about to begin an extraordinary creation. With a steady breath, he gently swept the blush brush against his skin, a soft caress on his high cheekbones. The pigment, a delicate rose, awakened his complexion, reflecting a warmth in his gaze. As he continued, his confidence grew, steering away from any quiver of doubt. The art of transformation captivated Matthew's spirit, and he eagerly grabbed the next protagonist of his makeup palette. His eager eyes found the lipstick, not just any shade, but the crimson siren enclosed in a sleek silver tube. He held it close, a sacred ritual, ready to unleash the finale of his long-anticipated metamorphosis. He leaned closer to the mirror, parting his lips slightly. The lipstick felt cool against his skin as he carefully traced the outline of his mouth. His heart raced with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. This was more than just makeup. It was an expression of his true self, a self he'd kept hidden for far too long. As he finished applying the lipstick, Matthew took a step back to admire his handiwork. The person staring back at him from the mirror was both familiar and new. His brown hair framed a face that looked softer, more feminine. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was seeing the real him. Or rather, the real her.
Matilda,
he whispered to his reflection, trying out the name he'd chosen for himself. It felt right, like a perfect fit. He smoothed down the front of his blue shirt, wishing he had something more feminine to wear. But for now, this would have to do. The important thing was that he finally felt comfortable in his own skin. Matilda, was so absorbed in her reflection that she didn't hear the footsteps approaching her bedroom. The door creaked open, and a gasp broke the silence.
Matthew! What are you doing?
Matilda froze, her heart stopping for a moment before thundering in her chest. She turned slowly to face her mother, who stood in the doorway with a look of shock on her face.
Mom,
Matilda's voice cracked. She'd imagined this moment countless times, but now that it was here, she found herself at a loss for words. Her mother took a tentative step into the room, her eyes moving from Matilda's face to the makeup scattered on the dresser. Are you? Matilda swallowed hard, fighting back tears. I'm sorry, Mom. I know this must be a shock, but this is who I am. I've been trying to find a way to tell you, but I was so scared. Her mother's expression softened, and she moved closer. Oh, sweetheart. You don't have to be scared. Not with me. You're not angry? Matilda asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Angry? No, honey. I'm just surprised and a little sad that you felt you couldn't tell me sooner. Her mother reached out and took her hand. But I love you, no matter what. I just want you to be happy. The dam broke, and tears streamed down Matilda's face, smearing her carefully applied makeup. Her mother pulled her into a tight embrace, stroking her hair. It's okay, sweetie. It's all going to be okay. They stood like that for a long moment, Matilda's tears soaking into her mother's shoulder. When they finally pulled apart, her mother cupped her face gently. Now, why don't you tell me everything? I want to understand. Matilda nodded, wiping her eyes. I've always felt different. Like I was born in the wrong body. For years, I tried to ignore it, to be the son you expected me to be, but it was tearing me apart inside. Her mother listened intently, her eyes filled with a mixture of concern and love. How long have you known? I think I've always known, deep down, but I started to really understand it a few years ago. I've been researching, trying to figure out what it all means. And the makeup? Is this the first time you've... Matilda shook her head. No, I've been practicing for a while now. It helps me feel more like myself, more like Matilda. Her mother's eyebrows raised slightly. Matilda? Is that the name you've chosen? Yes, Matilda said, a small smile tugging at her lips. Do you like it? It's beautiful, her mother replied, returning the smile. It suits you. They sat down on the edge of the bed, and Matilda's mother took her hand again. I want you to know that I support you, 100%, but I also want to make sure you're taking care of yourself. Have you talked to anyone about this? A therapist, maybe? Matilda shook her head. No, I've been too afraid. I didn't want anyone to know. I think it might be a good idea to talk to someone who specializes in these things. They could help you navigate this journey, and maybe help us figure out how to tell your father. The mention of her father sent a jolt of fear through Matilda. Do you think he'll understand? Her mother sighed. I won't lie to you, honey. It might be difficult for him at first, but he loves you, just like I do. We'll face this together, as a family. Matilda nodded, feeling a mix of anxiety and hope. Thank you, Mom. I don't know what I'd do without you. You'll never have to find out, her mother assured her. Now, why don't you show me how to apply that lipstick properly? I think we both need a touch-up after all these tears. Matilda laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. As she reached for the makeup remover, she caught sight of herself in the mirror again. The person looking back at her was still a work in progress, but for the first time, she felt like she was on the right path. The following weeks were a whirlwind of emotions and changes. Matilda's mother helped her schedule an appointment with a gender therapist, who provided invaluable support and guidance. Together, they worked on a plan for Matilda's transition, taking things one step at a time. The first major step was telling her father. Matilda's stomach churned with anxiety as they sat him down in the living room one evening. Her mother squeezed her hand reassuringly as she began to speak. Dad, I have something important to tell you, Matilda said, her voice trembling slightly. I'm transgender. I've always felt like a woman inside, and I've decided to start living as my true self. My name is Matilda now. Her father's face went through a range of emotions. Confusion, shock, and finally, a deep sadness. I don't understand, he said quietly. You've always been my son. How can you suddenly be... not? Matilda took a deep breath. It's not sudden, Dad. I've felt this way for a long time. I just didn't know how to tell you. Her father stood up abruptly, pacing the room. This is a lot to take in. I need some time to process this. As he left the room, Matilda felt her heart sink. Her mother pulled her close, whispering words of encouragement. Give him time, sweetie. He'll come around. Over the next few days, the atmosphere in the house was tense. Matilda's father was quiet and distant, often retreating to his study. But slowly, things began to change. One evening, he approached Matilda as she sat reading in the living room. I've been doing some research, he said, his voice gruff but not unkind. I still don't fully understand, but I want to. Can we talk? Tears welled up in Matilda's eyes as she nodded. They spent hours talking that night, with Matilda explaining her feelings and experiences, and her father listening intently. By the end of the conversation, he pulled her into a tight hug.
You'll always be my child,
he said, his voice thick with emotion.
And I'll always love you, no matter what name you go by or how you look.
I'm sorry it took me a while to get here. With her family's support, Matilda began to transition more openly. She started hormone therapy, which brought both excitement and challenges. Her body began to change, softening in some places and developing in others. Some days were difficult, filled with dysphoria and doubt, but she pushed through, reminding herself of how far she'd come. One of the most significant moments came when Matilda decided to go shopping for a new wardrobe. Her mother insisted on coming along, turning it into a mother-daughter bonding experience. As they entered the women's section of the department store, Matilda felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She ran her hand over the soft fabrics of dresses and blouses, marveling at the variety of styles and colors. "See anything you like?" her mother asked, holding up a pretty blue sundress. Matilda's eyes lit up. "It's beautiful," she said, reaching out to touch the material. "But I'm not sure if I'm ready for dresses yet. Maybe we could start with some blouses and pants." Her mother nodded, understanding. "Of course, honey. Whatever makes you comfortable." They spent the afternoon trying on different outfits, laughing and critiquing each look. Matilda felt a warmth in her chest as she realized this was the kind of mother-daughter experience she'd always dreamed of, but never thought she'd have. In the dressing room, Matilda slipped on a soft, blue blouse. As she buttoned it up, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. The blouse hugged her developing curves in a way her old clothes never had. For a moment, she just stood there, taking in her reflection. "Matilda, how does it look?" her mother called from outside. She opened the door, a wide smile on her face.
"It's perfect,"
she said, twirling around. Her mother's eyes welled up with tears. "Oh, sweetheart, you look beautiful." As they left the store with bags full of new clothes, Matilda felt a sense of lightness she'd never experienced before. She was finally starting to feel comfortable in her own skin. The next big hurdle was coming out to her friends and extended family. Matilda decided to start with her closest friend, Emma. They met for coffee at their favorite cafe, and Matilda's hands shook as she stirred her latte.
There's something I need to tell you,"
she began, her voice barely above a whisper. Emma leaned in, concern etched on her face.
"What is it? Are you okay?"
Matilda took a deep breath. "I'm transgender. I've started transitioning, and I'm living as a woman now. My name is Matilda." There was a moment of silence, and Matilda's heart raced as she waited for Emma's reaction. Then, to her surprise, Emma reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Thank you for trusting me with this," Emma said, her voice warm. "I'm so proud of you for being true to yourself." Tears of relief spilled down Matilda's cheeks. "You have no idea how much that means to me." Emma grinned. "So, Matilda, huh? I like it. It suits you." From that moment on, Emma became Matilda's strongest ally. She helped Matilda navigate the sometimes treacherous waters of social transition, standing up for her when others were less understanding. Not everyone was as accepting as Emma. Some friends drifted away, uncomfortable with the change. Extended family members had mixed reactions, with some embracing Matilda wholeheartedly and others struggling to understand. But through it all, Matilda held her head high, drawing strength from those who supported her. As the months passed, Matilda's confidence grew. She started to experiment more with her style, finding joy in expressing her femininity. Her brown hair, which she'd always kept short, began to grow out, and she enjoyed trying different hairstyles. One day, as she was getting ready for work, she decided to try something new. She gathered her hair, which now reached just past her shoulders, and began to braid it. Her fingers moved deftly, weaving the strands together. When she finished, she secured the braid with an elastic and examined her handiwork in the mirror. The person looking back at her was undeniably feminine, with soft features framed by the elegant braid. Matilda smiled at her reflection, feeling a surge of pride and happiness. As she walked into the office that day, she held her head high, ready to face whatever challenges came her way. Her co-workers had been informed of her transition, and while there had been some initial awkwardness, most had been supportive. Her boss, Mr. Thompson, stopped by her desk mid-morning.
"Matilda,"
he said, still sounding slightly unsure of the name.
"Could I see you in my office for a moment?"
Matilda's heart raced as she followed him. Had there been complaints? Was she in trouble? Once inside, Mr. Thompson closed the door and turned to face her.
"I wanted to check in with you,"
he said, his tone gentle.
"How are you finding things here since your transition?"
Matilda relaxed slightly. "It's been an adjustment," she admitted.
"But overall, everyone has been very kind."
Mr. Thompson nodded.
"I'm glad to hear that. I want you to know that we value you as an employee, Matilda. Your work has always been excellent, and that hasn't changed. If you ever face any issues or discrimination, please don't hesitate to come to me."
Tears pricked at Matilda's eyes.
"Thank you, sir. That means a lot to me."
As she left his office, Matilda felt a renewed sense of purpose. She was more than just her gender identity. She was a capable, valuable person with much to offer the world. The journey of transition wasn't always easy. There were days when dysphoria hit hard, when the mirror seemed to mock her efforts. But there were also moments of pure joy, of feeling completely at home in her own skin. One such moment came on a warm summer evening. Matilda had been invited to a friend's barbecue, and for the first time, she decided to wear a dress in public. She chose the blue sundress her mother had picked out during their shopping trip, pairing it with simple sandals. As she arrived at the party, she felt all eyes on her. For a moment, panic threatened to overwhelm her. But then Emma appeared at her side, linking their arms together. "You look amazing," Emma whispered. "Now come on, let's get something to drink." Throughout the evening, Matilda found herself relaxing more and more. She laughed with friends, played silly party games, and even flirted a little with a cute guy from Emma's work. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the gathering, Matilda realized she hadn't thought about being trans once in the past few hours. She'd just been herself. Later that night, as she got ready for bed, Matilda caught sight of herself in the mirror. Her brown hair was slightly tousled from the evening breeze, and her cheeks were flushed with happiness. The blue dress hung perfectly on her frame, accentuating the changes brought by months of hormone therapy. For the first time, Matilda didn't see a work in progress when she looked at her reflection. She saw a woman, confident, happy, and whole. As she drifted off to sleep that night, Matilda felt a sense of peace she'd never known before. The journey wasn't over. There would always be challenges to face and growth to experience, But she knew now, without a doubt, that she was on the right path. The next morning, Matilda woke up feeling refreshed and energized. She had the day off work and decided to use it to tackle a project she'd been putting off for a while, cleaning out her closet. It was time to let go of the last remnants of her old life and make room for the new. She put on some upbeat music and began sorting through her clothes. Each item held memories, some bittersweet, others painful. She came across an old blue shirt, the one she'd been wearing the day her mother discovered her secret. Matilda held it for a moment, marveling at how much had changed since then. As she worked, she separated her clothes into piles: keep, donate, and discard. The keep pile was significantly smaller than the others, consisting mainly of a few comfortable t-shirts and pajamas. The donate pile grew larger, filled with clothes that no longer fit her body or her identity. Midway through the process, there was a knock at her bedroom door. "Come in," Matilda called out, expecting to see her mother. To her surprise, it was her father who entered. He looked around at the piles of clothes, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Spring cleaning?" he asked. Matilda nodded. "Something like that. Just making room for the new me, I guess." Her father's eyes softened.
"I'm proud of you, you know,"
he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "I know this hasn't been easy, but you've shown incredible strength." Tears welled up in Matilda's eyes. "Thanks, Dad. That means everything to me." He cleared his throat, clearly emotional himself. I wanted to give you something." From behind his back, he produced a small, wrapped package. Matilda took it, her hands shaking slightly. She carefully unwrapped it to reveal a delicate silver necklace with a heart-shaped pendant.
"It was your grandmother's,"
her father explained.
I thought you might like to have it."
Matilda was speechless. This was more than just a piece of jewelry. It was an acceptance of her as a woman, as a daughter. She threw her arms around her father, hugging him tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "I love it." Her father helped her put on the necklace, his large hands fumbling slightly with the clasp. When it was secured, Matilda turned to look in the mirror. The silver heart rested just below her collarbone, catching the light. "It looks beautiful on you," her father said, his voice thick with emotion. As he left the room, Matilda touched the necklace gently. It was a tangible reminder of how far she'd come, of the love and acceptance she'd found. With renewed energy, she returned to her closet cleaning. By the end of the day, her closet was transformed. The clothes that remained were all hers, truly hers, reflecting her style and identity. As the weeks turned into months, Matilda continued to grow and evolve. She started volunteering at a local organization that supported LGBTQ+ youth, using her experiences to help others who were just beginning their journeys. One evening, after a particularly emotional support group meeting, Matilda found herself walking through the park, lost in thought. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. She sat down on a bench, watching as people passed by. Couples holding hands, families with young children, friends laughing together. For a moment, she felt a pang of loneliness. Despite the support of her family and friends, there was still a part of her that yearned for a deeper connection, for someone to share her life with. As if on cue, her phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Blind date tomorrow night? My coworker Mark is interested. He knows about you and is totally cool. What do you say?" Matilda's heart raced. A date? Was she ready for that? She thought about how far she'd come, about the confidence she'd gained. Maybe it was time to take another step forward. "Sure," she texted back. "Why not?" The next evening, Matilda stood in front of her mirror, scrutinizing her appearance. She'd chosen a simple blue dress. Blue had become her favorite color since that first shopping trip with her mother. Her brown hair was styled in loose waves, framing her face softly. As she applied her makeup, she thought about how different this felt from those secret sessions in her bedroom. Now, it wasn't about hiding or transforming. It was about enhancing, about feeling confident and beautiful. The date itself was a pleasant surprise. Mark was kind and funny, and he seemed genuinely interested in getting to know Matilda. They talked about their jobs, their hobbies, their families. When the topic of her transition came up, Mark listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions.
"You're incredibly brave,"
he said at one point.
"I can't imagine how difficult that must have been."
Matilda smiled. "It was hard," she admitted. "But it was also the most freeing thing I've ever done. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm truly myself." As they walked out of the restaurant, Mark reached for her hand. Matilda felt a flutter in her chest as their fingers intertwined. It was a small gesture, but it felt monumental. "I'd like to see you again," Mark said as they reached her car. Matilda nodded, a warm smile spreading across her face. "I'd like that too." As she drove home that night, Matilda felt a sense of possibility she'd never experienced before. Her life was opening up in ways she'd never imagined. The following weeks were a whirlwind of new experiences. Matilda and Mark continued to see each other, their relationship deepening with each date. She introduced him to her parents, heart pounding as she waited for their reaction. But she needn't have worried. They welcomed him warmly, clearly happy to see their daughter so content. At work, Matilda took on new responsibilities. Impressing her boss with her dedication and creativity, she was no longer just the trans employee. She was a valued member of the team, respected for her skills and ideas. One sunny Saturday afternoon, Matilda found herself back in the park where she'd made the decision to go on that first date with Mark. This time, she wasn't alone. Mark walked beside her, their hands clasped together. They stopped at the bench where she'd sat that evening, and Matilda told him about that moment, about feeling lonely and unsure, about taking a chance on love. Mark listened, his eyes soft with affection. When she finished speaking, he took both of her hands in his.
"Matilda,"
he said, his voice filled with emotion.
"You are the most incredible person I've ever met. Your strength, your kindness, your authenticity, they inspire me every day. I love you, exactly as you are."
Tears welled up in Matilda's eyes as she squeezed his hands.
"I love you too,"
she whispered. As they continued their walk, Matilda felt a profound sense of peace wash over her. She thought about the long journey that had brought her to this moment. The fear, the pain, the joy, the triumph. Every step had led her here, to a place where she was truly, completely herself. The sun was setting as they made their way home, casting long shadows across the path. Matilda looked at her reflection in a shop window as they passed. She saw a woman, confident, loved, and at peace with herself. She saw Matilda in all her beautiful complexity. As they rounded the corner to her street, Matilda's parents were outside, waving to them. Her mother's face lit up with a smile, and her father gave a friendly nod to Mark. This was her life now, full of love acceptance, and possibilities. Matilda squeezed Mark's hand, feeling grateful for every moment that had brought her to this place. She was Matilda, daughter, friend, partner, woman, and she was exactly who she was meant to be.
Thanks for watching, my girlies. Be sure to check out Patreon for more.